Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Imagine walking through a bustling city, surrounded by the noise of people, the hum of traffic, and the rush of everyday life. You're just going about your day when, out of nowhere, a little voice stops you in your tracks. You turn, expecting to see a shy child asking for directions, or maybe a question about a toy. But what you hear next, it's not what you expect. "Hey, sir, my dad has a birthmark just like yours." The voice belonged to a young boy, probably no older than 6 or 7. He stood there, wide-eyed and full of curiosity, gazing up at the man he had just addressed. But the man, he wasn't just any man. He was one of the richest, most powerful figures in the business world. A billionaire, known for his secretive nature and the power he wielded in every corner of the globe. His face, usually stoic and unreadable, froze. For a moment, it was as if time itself had stopped. Now, you might be wondering, what could possibly be so shocking about a simple comment from a child? A birthmark, after all, is just a mark, a part of someone's skin, something harmless, something people overlook every day. But for this billionaire, it wasn't just any mark. It was something he kept hidden, something that had been part of his life for as long as he could remember. And here, in this moment, this boy had just brought it up, as if it was the most casual thing in the world. The billionaire's face shifted from surprise to uncertainty. His eyes flickered toward the boy, then nervously scanned the crowd around them. Could anyone else have heard? Had the child been observing him from a distance? His mind raced, his thoughts tumbling over each other. Who was this kid? How could he know something so personal, so specific? The little boy, seemingly oblivious to the storm of thoughts swirling in the billionaire's head, continued, his innocent voice breaking the silence. "My dad's got the same birthmark right here," he said, pointing to the side of his neck. "He told me it's special. Is it special to you too, sir?" For a brief moment, the billionaire didn't respond. He was stuck. The words weren't coming out. His mind was flooded with memories he thought he had long buried. The birthmark, his father, the stories his mother used to tell him about it, the strange way his family had always treated it, as if it were a secret that shouldn't be talked about. But this child, this innocent child had just broken open that door, one that the billionaire had kept locked for years. What did this all mean? How could this boy know something so intimate about him, about his family? But the boy wasn't finished. With a look of excitement in his eyes, he added, "I think my dad and you must be like really special friends. You should come meet him." The billionaire was frozen. His heart pounded in his chest, and his hands clenched into fists. What was happening? Was this some sort of coincidence? Was this child really telling the truth? Or was there something else going on here? His thoughts were spinning, and he couldn't make sense of it. He looked down at the little boy, who was staring up at him with wide, trusting eyes. There was no fear, no hesitation in the boy's expression. It was as if he had no idea of the gravity of what he had just said. He was just a kid after all. He couldn't possibly understand the implications of his words. The billionaire forced a smile, a tight, uncomfortable one that didn't quite reach his eyes. He bent down, trying to meet the boy's gaze at eye level, and said, "That's interesting, little one, but I don't think your dad and I are connected in any way." But the boy shook his head, the innocence in his eyes unwavering. "No, sir, you're wrong. My dad said it's a sign. He said people with the same birthmark, they're meant to know each other. He said it's something important. He said it's something that ties them together." The words hit the billionaire like a wave crashing against a cliff. His heart skipped a beat. The boy's father, the same birthmark. this was no coincidence. He had heard those same words years ago from someone close to him, someone he had not thought about in a long time. But how could this be? Was it possible? Had this boy's father really known about the birthmark? Had he known what it meant? And if so, why had he never come forward? Why hadn't he mentioned it before? The billionaire's mind was racing, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and uncertainty. The boy's words echoed in his ears, each one like a hammer driving into his consciousness. People with the same birthmark. They're meant to know each other. But what did that even mean? And why, after all these years, had this child just appeared out of nowhere to say this? What was the connection? The answers were just out of reach, hidden behind layers of time and mystery. And as the billionaire stood there, staring at the little boy who had unknowingly opened a door to a part of his life he had long locked away, one question kept nagging at him. Who was the boy's father? The tension in the air was thick, and, for the first time in a long time, the billionaire felt a flicker of doubt creeping into his mind. Could this be the beginning of something much bigger? A secret he had long since buried, now rising to the surface. As the boy tugged at his sleeve, urging him to meet his father, the billionaire was faced with a choice. Should he follow this child's lead and risk uncovering something he wasn't ready to face? Or should he walk away, leaving the past where it belonged? One thing was certain. His life, as he knew it, was about to change forever. The billionaire stood there, the weight of the boy's words pressing down on him like an anchor. The innocent sincerity in the child's eyes seemed so pure, so honest. And yet there was something about it, something about the way the boy spoke, that made the billionaire's heart race with unease. How could he know? How could anyone know about the birthmark, about that mark, the one his family had always treated like a shadow? A secret buried in the deepest corners of their past. The billionaire's name was Alex Westbrook, but to the world he was a titan, a self-made man, a genius in business, who had clawed his way to the top, rising from humble beginnings to the very peak of the corporate world. People admired him, envied him, even feared him, yet beneath the polished exterior, beneath the billionaire status and flawless image, Alex carried a secret that, for years, he had worked hard to bury, the birthmark, the one that marked the side of his neck, just below his ear. It wasn't a simple birthmark. It was a symbol that had been passed down through generations in his family. A symbol that no one ever spoke about, yet everyone in his family knew it held significance. As a child, Alex had been told strange stories about it, stories of a bloodline that went back hundreds of years, a lineage tied to powerful, influential families across the world. His parents never explained the full extent of it. They only whispered about it in hushed tones, always making sure to cover it when company came around. Don't talk about it, they'd say. It's not for everyone to know. But the weight of those words, the way his father's eyes would darken whenever the topic came up, it all felt too mysterious. And as Alex grew older, the more questions he had, the more distant the answers became. Years passed, and the mark remained a silent part of his life, something he never allowed anyone to see. It was a mark of power, yes, but also one that came with a heavy burden. He'd learned to keep it hidden, to live his life as if it didn't exist. He buried himself in his work, in his billions, in the endless cycle of business deals and investments. It was easier that way, easier than facing the truth of what the birthmark might mean. But now, this boy, this little stranger, had pulled that veil back. The child's words had cracked open a door that Alex had kept tightly shut for so many years. My dad has the same birthmark." The boy tugged at his sleeve again, his voice filled with innocent excitement. "Come on, sir, you really should meet him. My dad says people with the same birthmark always know each other. It's like fate or something." Alex took a step back, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. He glanced around, half expecting to see someone in the crowd watching him, someone who was orchestrating this. But there was no one, just the boy, looking up at him with wide eyes, waiting for an answer. "Who is your dad?" Alex finally managed to ask, his voice low and cautious. He knew his words would carry weight. He knew this moment, this chance, encounter, was no coincidence. The boy smiled, his face lighting up. "His name's Robert Green. He's not famous like you, but he's super smart. He works on things that help people. He's been telling me stories about the birthmark for as long as I can remember." The name struck Alex like a bolt of lightning. Robert Green. He had heard that name before. He had seen it in old business reports, buried deep in obscure documents. Robert Green was a man who had kept his distance from the public eye, but the few times Alex had crossed paths with him, whether through a passing business deal or mutual contacts, he had always felt something strange, something unspoken. Alex's hands clenched at his sides. "Where does your dad live?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "He lives in a house on the outskirts of the city," the boy replied without hesitation. "It's kind of far, but he's always home. You can come see him anytime." The air around Alex grew thicker, heavier with every passing second. He had to know. He had to understand what this all meant. The birthmark, Robert Green. And now, this child, this innocent little messenger. His instincts told him that everything in his life was about to change. The boy kept talking, babbling excitedly about his father and the stories he'd told him. But Alex's mind was no longer focused on the child. His thoughts were racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. Was it possible that Robert Green knew about the birthmark? That he had some sort of connection to Alex's family? What was the significance of it all? And most importantly, why had he never sought Alex out before now? Alex knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. He had to see Robert Green. He had to understand what this all meant before it spiraled out of control. And yet, as the boy continued to talk, a nagging feeling began to settle in the back of Alex's mind. What if Robert Green didn't want to be found? What if he had spent years staying in the shadows for a reason? Alex's chest tightened as the reality of the situation set in. This wasn't just about a birthmark anymore. This was about uncovering a past that had been carefully buried for years. This was about discovering the truth about who Alex's family really was, and the price that truth might come with. The little boy finally stopped speaking, looking up at Alex expectantly. "Well, sir, are you coming with me?" he asked, his tone hopeful. Alex hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His heart beat faster. Could he really face this? Could he really confront the past, risk everything, and meet Robert Green? He had spent years hiding from the truth, but now it was right in front of him. The truth was waiting. Without another word, Alex nodded. "Lead the way." As the boy skipped ahead, Alex's mind was flooded with questions. Was this really the beginning of something bigger? Or was it a mistake he would soon regret? The car ride to Robert Green's house felt like an eternity. Every turn, every passing street, only added to the tension building inside Alex. What awaited him on the other side? Would he find answers? Or would he uncover something that would shatter everything he thought he knew? The car finally came to a stop in front of a large, unassuming house on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't as grand as Alex expected. Not the sort of place a man of Robert Greene's rumored stature would live. Instead, it was a humble home with a well-kept garden. The kind of place where you could easily forget the world's biggest business secrets were hiding in plain sight. This boy excitedly jumped out of the car, running toward the front door. Alex, though, couldn't shake the sense of foreboding. The knot in his stomach grew tighter with every step he took toward the house. His mind was racing with possibilities. What could Robert Greene know? What had he been keeping from Alex all these years? The door creaked open, and a man appeared in the doorway. He was tall, but not imposing. His appearance was warm, inviting, almost fatherly, and there it was, the birthmark. It was identical to Alex's. No mistake. It sat at the exact same spot on Robert's neck, just beneath his ear, like a silent symbol of something far bigger than either of them could understand. "Ah, so you came," Robert said, his voice calm, measured, but with a hint of curiosity. He extended a hand to Alex, his eyes studying him as if he already knew everything about him. "I wondered when you'd show up. I'm Robert Greene." Alex took a deep breath, shaking his hand, though his mind was a whirlwind of questions. "I had to see for myself. It can't be a coincidence." Robert smiled softly, a look that almost seemed sympathetic. "No, it's not a coincidence. But we can't change the past, can we? It's time you knew the truth." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment he had spent his entire life trying to avoid. Robert led him inside, and the two of them sat down at a small kitchen table where the boy, now standing nearby, quietly watched them, his innocent smile never leaving his face. "The birthmark," Robert began, leaning back in his chair, "has been passed down in our families for generations. But it's not just some random mark. It's a symbol, a mark of our bloodline, one that connects us to a far-reaching legacy. A legacy that has shaped the very foundation of the business world you know today. I'm sure you've noticed the connections." Alex could hardly believe what he was hearing. "So you and we're related." Robert nodded slowly. "Not directly, but in a way, yes. We come from the same lineage, from families who were once united in a cause greater than business itself. Your family was always on top, ruling quietly from behind the scenes. But my family, we've been working in the shadows, trying to undo the damage done by those who wanted to take the power for themselves. Our ancestors started something together, but it was torn apart. The birthmark, the symbol. It's what's left of that unity. It's a secret that's been hidden for centuries. And now you and I are the last to carry it." Alex was stunned, overwhelmed. For years, he had thought his success was built on his own merit. But now he realized that he was only one piece in a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that had been carefully constructed long before he was born. The legacy, the power, the control. He had inherited it all without even knowing what it meant. "I don't understand," Alex said, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why all the secrecy?" Robert sighed. "Because the world wasn't ready for this truth. Your family's legacy, Alex, is not one of kindness. It's one of dominance, of influence, of controlling everything from the shadows. We had to make sure you were ready to take it on. You needed to know the weight of it, the consequences. I've watched you for years, hoping you would make the right choices, but I've never been sure you were truly prepared for what's coming next." Alex sat back, feeling a deep sense of dread settle over him. What had he been part of? What had his success really been built on? "But there's more," Robert continued. "This mark, this legacy, it's not just about wealth and power. It's about understanding the true history of our families, There's a reason our families have been at the top for so long. There's a purpose behind the mark, one that involves far more than just business. But that's a story for another time. Alex felt the weight of his words sink in, like a burden that had been passed on to him. He had come here seeking answers, but what he had uncovered felt heavier than anything he could have imagined. This wasn't just about a birthmark anymore. This was about something much greater, something that would change everything he knew about himself and the world around him. The boy, still standing near the doorway, seemed oblivious to the tension in the air. His innocent gaze was fixed on Alex, waiting for a reaction. "Are you okay?" the boy asked, his voice soft. Alex forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Robert stood, walking over to the window and staring out at the garden. "You'll have to decide, Alex. The future of the legacy, of this mark, it's in your hands now. What you choose will shape everything." Alex stood, his mind racing. For the first time, he realized the true weight of his family's legacy. It wasn't just about success or wealth. It was about carrying the responsibility of something far bigger, far older. And now the choices he made would determine the future, not just for him, but for everyone connected to the secret that had been kept for so long. As he walked toward the door, the boy's voice echoed in his mind. "Are you coming back, sir?" Alex turned one last time, glancing at Robert, who simply nodded. "The decision is yours, Alex. Make it wisely." With that, Alex stepped outside into the fading sunlight, the weight of the birthmark heavy on his gay shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The future was waiting, and it was up to him to decide how it would unfold. And so, with one last glance at the house behind him, Alex walked into the unknown, knowing that his next steps would determine everything.